Hello, in this series we're building a granulator for granular synthesis in the chucK programming language. You can find all the code here at my GitHub page. So for the first part, this is part one, we're going to simply play a sound buffer. We're going to simply play a sound file through chucK and learn some of the basics of how to do that. So what we're going to use is we're going to use a sound buff object. And let's just give it a variable. We'll call it buff. All right. And you can go here to this link here and see the UGen sound buff in chucK and the various things it can do. And there's even examples if you want to look at the example. And these are the various functions that it has. So if we want to read a sound file into the buffer buff, we just simply take the path and chucK it to buff read. So if we look at buff read, it takes a string. Yeah, we're giving it a string, loads files for reading, right? So this is just the path to chucK on my hard drive. I've included a couple samples in this tutorial. I got them from Free Sound. So we're chucking it to the buffer, sound buff. And then we're going to create our patch. So let's go ahead and actually just do this here, even though the answers are there. We'll just create a patch anew. So we're going to chucK it over to buff read. And then we're going to create a patch, basically chucking our buffer over to the DAC so it can play out as sound. All right. Now, a couple of things that might be handy to do to our buffer, and if we go back here and we can look at them, is to set the rate if we want. That means the playback rate, so we can play it back at 1, or the normal speed, or half speed 0.5, or double speed 0.2. So let's go ahead and do that. Set some arguments here. We'll do, well, here I did position first, so we'll do that. Let's look at post, sorry. We can set the position, and it's in number of samples, okay? So if that's the start playback position. So if I give it a 0, I chucK 0 to the buff.post, that means it'll start playing back from sample 0. Now I think my sample here, the glass break one, is a little less than a second. So if I wanted to say, and I think I'm at a sample rate of 44,100. So if I wanted to play it, start playing it about halfway through, you know, it might be like 22,100, something like that. I mean, I think it's a little less than a thing, so maybe something like, oops, like 18,000 or something, whatever. You know, you can figure that out. But we'll just start at 0. But basically, just to keep in mind, it's samples. So you have to give it a sample value, which sample to start playing back from. All right. Then we'll get back to rate here. We'll give it a float. Rate is looking for a float to set the playback rate. So we'll give it a float, and it'll be buff.rate. So that'll be the playback rate of our sound file. Now, just with everything in chucK, hopefully you did some introductory videos, just how to use chucK and how chucK works. Just as with everything in chucK, you have to kind of be very explicit about time. So we'll play back this sample for, you know, let's say in my example, 200 milliseconds. Okay, and that'll be how long we play it back for, because we're advancing time by 200 milliseconds. All right, and if all goes well and everything's fine, we start our virtual machine. We'll have it started already, but I'll start it here, and then we play it back. We add the shred, and there it's playing back. Now, if I wanted to play it for a little bit longer, like I said, I don't think it's quite a second long, but we'll advance time for a second. Okay. And if we want to, for example, play it much shorter, let's do 50. And of course, you can adjust any of these other parameters. We can play it back at 2 times the rate. We can start in, say at 10,000, start in a little bit. Sample 10,000 we'll start in. Even start at sample, oh, I don't know, 20,000. You can turn the rate right down if you want. So lots of things you can do quite simply. All right. If we want to play more than one grain, we can just use a simple repeat. And we'll make it repeat 20. And enclose whatever we want to repeat in curly brackets. Just a hint, if you want to like indent things, you select the selection and just press tab. It'll auto indent for you, chucK, the IDE there, the mini article. So let's see what that sounds like. All right. Do something much shorter. All right. All right. Well, there's part 1 for our granulator tutorial.